everybody, this is Claudia Wells, the original Jennifer Parker in Back to the Future. And you're listening to Tommy, Throwback, Kovac on Splat from the Past. That's good advice, Tommy.
Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today, I will be welcoming the second George McFly from Back to the Future 2 and 3, and I am talking about Jeffrey Weissman. Yes, Jeffrey Weissman, who played George McFly in Back to the Future 2 and 3, is coming on the show today. And he's had a very interesting career. He's had small roles here and there, and he's had big roles here and there. He was in Pale Rider. He was in, Fast Break. He was in, he was in so much stuff here. And he's also been Stan Laurel on the Universal Tour. He was in Twilight Zone, the movie, Get Crazy, Johnny Dangerously, lots of stuff. And I'm having him on the show today to talk about all that stuff. So, here is my interview with Jeffrey Weissman. Hey, Jeffrey, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm really enjoying it. It's a beautiful day, given the circumstances. How are you?
Pretty good. The weather over here in Reading is really nice. Can't complain there.
Beautiful glass bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. This is such a great honor. Thank you for taking the time today.
It's fascinating how especially since the lockdown, shelter in place, I have all this time, and then today is back-to-back-to-back stuff. I'm like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do it.
Awesome. So, going back in time, no pun intended, did you gravitate toward acting early on in your childhood?
Oh, before my childhood.
Before your childhood?
I think I came out of the womb as a ham. I had stories growing up of me being funny in my high chair, making trouble in the family, at the dinner table and being mischievous. And I remember always being attracted to, of course, from watching early television in the late 50s, early 60s, the good comedy and such. And then when I'd see shows shooting on location as a kid, I would, detour from going home and go over to watching, whatever they were shooting, the FBI or whatever shows were shooting in my neighborhood growing up in L.A. And I remember actually recognizing Monty Markham. I don't know if you know who he is. He had a show.
I've heard of him.
In the 60s called the Second 100 Years, and he was guest starring on this episode of the FBI that was shooting in my neighborhood. And he liked that I recognized him, and he got called to set, and there was another actor who I was chatting with, and I was being cocky little kid.
Yeah.
I think I had just graduated from 4th grade. And he says, "What do you got there, kid?" And I said, "It's my report card." And he says, "Let's have a look." And he said, "Oh, that's good. You got a B in English, and you got a C in history. What's this D in math? How are you going to know if your agent's screwing you or not, kid? You got to do better in math." Because I told him I wanted to be an actor. My dad had run some. Well, first my mom and dad both had been bail bondsmen,
mm-hmm.
and had bailed out several celebrities like Lenny Bruce and Winston Churchill's daughter on pot charges, and different celebs. And then my dad went into managing and owning sometimes these private clubs where bridge and backgammon was played. He was partners at one time with George Bassman, who was the arranger on Wizard of Oz, and then Lauren Green was a partner of his. Mm-hmm. So when I'd go to their clubs, I would meet Omar Sharif or Don Adams or various celebs,
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing my babysitter, in fact, when I was real young, flip out over meeting Omar Sharif, and then we went to the theater to see him in a new movie that had just premiered, and she flipped out again, and I was actually very fond of this babysitter, and I thought, wow, if that's how I get someone excited about me, I'm going to become an actor. So, for the wrong reason, of course, I was attracted for the I guess, fame there, the adoration. But I, was told by my parents that they didn't want me to be an actor.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of had to fight against them. I did shows in school, had to keep up my grades to be able to do those shows. And then community theater, but they never really would let me get an agent or pursue it. And I had friends who were, stars already as kids. Anissa Jones from Family Affair lived across the street for a while, and
mm-hmm.
Various other kids I knew through high school. My friend Terry Nunn from the band Berlin, I used to ditch school with her and watch her play pinball while she was up for a film called Tilt that Brooke Shields ended up getting, and various other roles. And I was kind of jealous. I really wanted to be working as a kid actor.
Mm-hmm.
But so my parents wouldn't allow me, so I just did shows at school or community theater, whatever I could. And then out of high school, I said I still want to do this, and I was living on my own. I paid a company that would offer pretty much bodies to be in these crowd scenes in films. Mm-hmm. And I started getting my foot in the door just to see what it was like to be on a big set, on a big movie studio set. So I think my first film was, I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Yeah.
Bob Zemeckis directed. And that was quite a trip because it was shot in the Burbank backlots, over 100 degrees out, and it's supposed to be freezing January in New York outside the Beatles hotel room. And we're all bundled up and chanting. I was a Ringo fan, and Zemeckis couldn't, I don't think he wanted to or had the confidence directing a large crowd, so he brought in his buddy Steven Spielberg to direct us.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, it was so hot, these extras were dropping like flies. It was just being overheated and such. It was quite a scene. Then I did a little bit on a film called FM, and The Rose with Bette Midler, and then on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band with Peter Frampton and the Bee Gees.
Yeah.
I did like 4 different scenes in that. The probably biggest one was with Alice Cooper being brainwashed as one of those weird Boy Scouts that Steve Martin's character sent to Alice's character. And that was kind of cool because I got to do some dance moves and got upgraded to a SAG contract, though I couldn't still afford to join at that time because I had to pay my rent.
Mm-hmm.
But it was cool to be on a big set. I remember I was, 18? I was like 7:30 in the morning just out of makeup, and I was like, who's smoking pot on the set?
Yeah.
And I followed my nose and found Barry Gibb. And I was like, are you smoking pot at 7:30? He goes, sure, would you like some? And I was like, I make tea on the high, of course. And I said, oh, no, that's terrible. There's tobacco in that. And he goes, well, that's how we like to smoke it. And I was like, okay. And then I remember Robin Gibb coming over and saying, hey, News Children of the World, whatever the album was, then just hit number 1 at the Billboard charts.
Mm-hmm.
First to congratulate them, I was very proud of that. Anyway, I have, ultimately a good time being on these sets, but ultimately for an actor, it's not very fulfilling if you want to sink your teeth into any kind of role. And I remember about that time I was called back for, Neil Simon had a new play going up down at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. I think it was Brighton Beach Memoirs.
Yeah.
And he told me, the casting director, is it Gordon Davidson? Gordon Hunt, one of the Gordons.
Probably, yeah.
He said, you got talent, kid, but you need to get solid training. And he made some recommendations, and I set my sights to go to the American Conservatory Theater, which I started in 81. And while I was doing my intermediate studies, I fell into an opportunity to screen test for the lead in a film called The Genius.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this open call that 500 guys going up for this role, and I had a friend who I thought was right for what they were looking for, but he wouldn't go alone, so I went with him, and it turned out that the director, Martin Brest, and the casting director at that time, Wallace Nocita, liked me and decided to give me a screen test. And in the interim, waiting for the screen test to come about, Warren Oates, who was the attached star for this film, died. And the film kind of went into turnaround because United Artists and MGM had merged. The execs couldn't decide whether or not they wanted to do this film. And then then an agent who was friends with the director, Martin Brest, who he had told that I was his favorite for the lead in this film, pursued me. I was up in the Bay Area, and she came up to visit her friend who was producing The Right Stuff at the time. And she kind of wooed me, this gal named Paula Cedar, and asked if I would let her be my agent to negotiate my contract before the screen test, which is kind of a rule now. By that time, studios had learned that actors, they needed to negotiate their contracts before they went into the screen test, because otherwise,
right.
if the actors knew that the studio wanted them so bad, the studio would be the one who would be held over a fire instead of the actors being held. Anyway, so eventually the film got back on track and renamed to War Games. Mm-hmm. And I had my screen test with Ali Sheedy the same day that Dana Carvey and Eric Stoltz, John Stockwell, Brian Backer. There were a lot of really great young talents testing for that lead, and none of us got it. It went to Matthew Broderick, you all know. But I did have an agent now, and I had to move back to Los Angeles after actually falling in love with the San Francisco Bay Area. Just found a kind of a breath of fresh air after growing up in the sort of tension, self-aware Los Angeles type of upbringing. So moved back to LA, and about 3 months after being back down there, auditioned for a film that I thought was not going to get finished. I had a call from my agent to go in and meet George Miller, the director of the Mad Max movies, and audition for him and his segment of the Twilight Zone movie. And the accident with Vic Morrow on the first episode had taken place 3 months beforehand. I was sure that, that was such a horrible tragedy they wouldn't finish the film, but Spielberg said, the tragedy happened, the accident happened on Landis's last day of shooting, and he had all the elements for these other stories still going ahead, and so he wanted to finish the film, which I thought was pretty bad taste. But I had a great meeting with George Miller and Mike Fenton and Mark Uliroff, and got cast, and so that was pretty much my first co-star role in film.
Wow.
The remake of Nightmare at 20,000 Feet.
Yeah. About a year after the War Games incident, didn't you also test for Lady Hawk?
I did. I had, in 74, started visiting Renaissance fairs and started working at them, 75, and then even moved from the Los Angeles original Renaissance fair up to the Northern California Pleasure Fair, and really loved doing medieval Shakespeare, that type of both stage scripted performance and improvisation. And when a buddy of mine, Carl Bressler, who became a pretty big actor and agent in his own right, heard that there was going to be another open call at Warner Brothers for this film that was looking for either a real tall guy or a little guy. He asked if I would go along, and I was like, I got an agent now. I don't need to go on open calls, but I decided to go after all, and spent 3 hours in line. And when I got to the front of the line, Lauren Lloyd, the casting director, she said, well, we know you. You were were up for hockey talk, man, and Clint liked you, but didn't want to hit you in the face with a rifle butt. And so you're big on our files. Don't worry about it. You know, you're not right for this. I was like, okay, thanks. Mm-hmm. And then the next day, my agent called me and said, what are you doing going on an open call? I was like, oh, shit. How did she find out about that? And I said, I was just giving a buddy company. And she goes, well, were you thinking that what happened on War Games was going to happen again on this? And I was like, well, in the back of my mind is a possibility. And she goes, good, because Richard Donner, the director who's over looking at locations in Italy right now, is interested in looking at you further. And the casting director wants you to come in and read for it. I got you the only available script, and it's being messengered over to you right now. I was like, what? It's like, okay. So I sat down and read Lady Hawk, and I fell in love with it. I thought it was a great, fun script. And the opportunity to play the mouse was delicious because I was, kind of primed from doing all my Renaissance fairs and loving Shakespeare and such, Christopher Marlowe. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of, read it, went on a little vacation, came back. My agent was ringing my phone off the hook when I got back from Mexico with my parents. And she said, where have you been? I said, well, I told you I was going to Mexico for a few days with my folks. She goes, well, they have an actor that they want for the role, but he's asking too much money, and they're going to test you. Can you get over to Warner Brothers this afternoon? I was like, yeah, sure. So I got over to, I guess I had one meeting before I had left town with the VP of casting at Warner Brothers, and she said, what do you like? What scene do you want to read? And I said, well, I found about 19 scenes that I love. She said, let's do them all. And so I used everything in her office as props and did these scenes. And she had told Richard Donner, the director, about me, and said, we'll take it from there. And then I didn't hear anything and went on that vacation, came back and was set to go on the screen test. And I thought I'd go to the studio about an hour early to, get centered and prepare myself for the test. And as I was locking my door, I remember the phone ringing. I was like, do I go back and answer it? No, I'm going to go. All right. So I went back and answered, and it was my agent saying, the test is off. Matthew Broderick came down in his price.
Oh, boy.
I was like, shit. Oh, well. And, I hate to say this, but I still haven't seen the film.
I've seen the film. It's a beautiful film,
I'm sure it was really, it was a good script. I felt the same way about The Name of the Rose. I was up for that one, too.
Oh, yeah? Yeah.
But, the ones that get away, I got great fishing story.
Mm-hmm. Good fishing story. So backtracking a little bit to the earlier films, were you in Fast Break?
I was. It was during that period working for that company that just supplied the extras, bit parts, and I was in a party scene for Gabe Kaplan's character. I was playing his cousin at his birthday party.
Yeah, I like that movie a lot. I think it's a very underrated comedy.
And, it was interesting to hang out with Gabe Kaplan. When he wasn't working, he just liked to be stuck in front of the TV watching game shows.
Yeah, and the legendary Jack Smite directed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what was he like?
It was a pretty relaxed set. I remember being in one other scene in the basketball court, and it was kind of cool. He brought in Dr. Demento to play music for us in between takes.
Oh,
it was kind of quirky and kick back, which is a nice, refreshing thing from a lot of the tense sets that can happen.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool. Dr. Demento. Been trying to get him on the show for a long time. So with the Twilight Zone experience and stuff, I remember seeing you do a panel at Comic-Con, and you brought up that you and Donna Dixon were involved for a little bit.
Well, I was on the outs kind of with my girlfriend at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Donna kind of confided in me. She had just broken up with, I think it was Paul Stanley from Kiss.
Yeah.
And we kind of, hung out together. It was really nice. She confided in me a lot of her personal stuff she was going through, and she's stunningly beautiful. And so I'd feel my heart skipping, and I was like, God, I'm still living with my girlfriend at the time, but we were kind of on the outside. I was like trying to figure out if I could try to get her number, stay in touch to date her. And I was going to get my nerve up at the cast party to kind of approach her. And I loved that cast party because I got when I rode the elevator with Scatman Crothers, I had a nice chat with him about his Ray-Ban glasses that his pal Jack Nicholson gave him. It was very cool.
Yeah.
But I think it was at that rap party that Donna met Dan Aykroyd, and they've been together, I think, ever since.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
I had the similar thing happen on Sgt. Pepper's, where there was this very cute blonde dancer that my heart just kind of skipped over. It started chatting her up, and by the second day of shooting that 3-day scene with Alice being up on the big screen as being Mr. Sun King or whatever, I remember I was only 18, and we went to lunch off this MGM lot the next day, and on the second day, and she bought me a beer, and I was really kind of having a little crush on this gal, very cute blonde dancer named Cheryl. And on the third day, I guess Alice had just come out of rehab or something, was coming on the set live finally. Mm-hmm. And I remember first thing in the morning getting up to the set, and there was Cheryl, and I walked up to her, and she was like, "Oh, Jeffrey, oh, so good to see you. I want to introduce you to my husband, Alice."
Oh, yeah.
Oh, nice to meet you. When I was working at Universal doing characters on the tour, down at the bottom, the lower lot where I was stationed after the tour opened a section down there where Jurassic Park ride is, I used to be able to walk around pretty freely down there. And when Sneakers was shooting with Sidney Poitier and Redford and River Phoenix, who I became pretty friendly with, there was Dan Aykroyd on that too. And I brought one day the pictures of me and Donna from the Twilight Zone. And I said, Dan, look, would you give one of these to Donna? I don't know if she remembers me or not, and he looked at me like, "What are you doing with these pictures of my wife?" No harm intended. I just want to make sure she got a copy. That's all. And he didn't seem too happy about that. I digress.
That's interesting. You were a concert audience member in Get Crazy?
Yeah, my buddy Jonathan Cripple, called all his friends to come be a part of that. He was sort of helping Janet Cunningham organize all the background on that one. So it was just visiting it, and it was very cool to kind of hang out peripherally with Lou Reed and Malcolm McDowell on that.
Mm-hmm. Alan Arkus directed. Yeah, that's an insane movie.
Yes. I had a time where I would just want to be on sets. And so if I had a friend working on something, I'd just kind of go hang out. Same thing on Repo Man. I had, who was it I knew on Repo? I think it was my ex-wife. Got something, she was on Back to School and Repo Man, and I'd just go hang out with her on those, and then I'd get enlisted to be in these scenes. There was this protest by the UFO enthusiasts while Emilio and the actress playing his girlfriend, they go into the vault in the bank.
Yeah.
And we're outside protesting, and all that got cut. But I remember it was 110 degrees out, and because Emilio and I had gone to school together, even though we weren't in the same year, I said, "Emilio, we're melting out here. Can we come in and join you in your trailer?" And he said, "Come on in. Just take it when I'm not here." No, that was always nice. Repo Man. And then on Back to School, I remember it was first Rodney, and then what's the little guy from Rocky?
Burt Young.
Burt. Both came up right in front of me trying to pick up on my wife, my ex-wife. I was like, "Hey, guys. Hi." And she was she was kind of tickled that they were being so forward, but I was like, okay. But I really don't have any kind of meaty parts in any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with was the Rent. When Chris Columbus came up to make Rent, I was like, I just want to get on the set. I need to be on the set. I'd love to be a part of the process. And I was just doing some background dance work in the La Vie Boheme scene. And then I, really got upset by the mistreatment. The AD in charge of the extras just treated everyone like with such contempt and like shit. I was like, ugh, get me out of here.
Yeah.
It was very upsetting. I've noticed that I learned kind of early on in 84, I think it was, I got a guest star role on Scarecrow and Mrs. King.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to the set very early, 6 in the morning or so, and started, over at the Honey Wagon to get a breakfast burrito and hung out. And the only people there really were the extras. And so I was eating and chatting and hanging out with them. And after a while, the AD came over to find me and said, "We got your trailer ready for you to go into makeup and all." And the extras looked at me like, "Why you? Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm the guest star." And they were like, "What are you doing hanging with us?" I was like, "Oh, come on. There shouldn't be this segregation anyway."
Yeah, I don't get that. I was talking to somebody the other day who was on a movie, and one of the stars that he was talking to, another star came up and said, "Why are you talking to him? He's only a day player." And it's like, I don't get that. I don't get that at all. It's ego, I guess.
Well, I can understand that often extras or bit players who may not have experience or professional attitude can overstep boundaries with stars and get starstruck or get needy or what have you. Mm-hmm. Generally, you can hold them at bay and just say, "Well, that's not appropriate." But I don't know. And sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the stars are the ones who are standoffish even to the co-stars or guest stars.
Mm-hmm.
It's baffling, like you say, egos make people do strange stuff, behaviors.
Absolutely. It's really strange. I heard that Johnny Dangerously was a very edgy set. Was it?
I enjoyed myself. I thought, first of all, the ensemble was so much fun. I remember standing there, once again, 7 o'clock in the morning after getting through makeup and wardrobe of Maureen Stapleton, walking past me in a beeline for makeup in her house robe still with her newspaper under her arm. Mm-hmm. and not really even looking at me, but I was, my jaw dropped because Maureen Stapleton and her legend, I just was thrilled. And without missing a beat, as she walked past me, she said, "It's not nice to look at an old lady first thing in the morning."
Yeah, she was great. She's great in that movie.
I adored it. The thing about that film that I don't think many people know is that there were many other musical numbers other than Mary Lou Henner's musical number in it.
Really?
Yeah. Stapleton had a number, Keaton, Piscopo, and I think it was because they really couldn't sing. I had to make my bills by being a waiter or a valet parking driver, or whatever I could in between film and TV work. And I was catering at that time when Johnny Dangerously was finally about to come out. And the catering company I worked for got the job to cater the wrap party for Johnny Dangerously.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to work it, and I was serving drinks to Amy Heckerling, the director, and Michael Keaton. And Michael leaned over to Amy and said, "Isn't he in the film?" And I kind of nodded and smiled. But it was at the wrap party they showed the musical numbers that got cut.
Oh.
And it was really fun to see them because they were actually funny numbers, but they just a little off key and such.
That's interesting. I did not know that it was going to be a musical like that.
I became somewhat friends with Dom DeLuise on that shoot. He was in one of the scenes I'm in as the Pope. And years later, when I started working at Universal as different characters, Dom had his new Candid Camera show. And when he saw me there as Stan Laurel, he insisted that the studio let my partner and I, as Stan Laurel and Hardy, warm up his crowds, his live audiences. And then when Feifel American Tail show opened up and Dom was the voice of the big cat, he insisted that we be a part of his live remotes to all the TV stations, the morning shows that he was promoting around the world. And Dom was just amazingly funny, but incredibly foul-mouthed at times, mainly because of the pain in his hips later on, but because of all the sort of mischief that executives would pull on him at the last minute before going live. Sometime I'll call me back and I'll tell you this amazing jaw-dropping story of Dom doing live television, swearing on national TV, show after show.
Did you know Michael Boogaloo Chambers?
I don't know.
Yeah, he's a dancer. He was on the show. He worked on the show. I just interviewed him about a month ago.
I knew briefly. Is it the director of Return to Horror High?
Bill Froelich.
Yes, he kind of. It was interesting. I got cast as the assistant director of the movie in the movie.
Yeah.
And went to the pre-shoot cast party. I think it was at his house out there in Malibu. And there was Maureen McGovern?
Oh, Maureen McCormick.
Maureen McCormick and George Clooney and, the rest of the cast. And we're all having drinks and having a great time. It's going to be a fun shoot. And I thought the script was very creative. I was looking forward to it. And I didn't have to get killed till maybe 2/3 through it. And then the next day I get a call from Bill and says, "Listen, we got to talk." I was like, "Oh, what's up?" Says, "Your agent's got it wrong. I need you on a daily contract, not a weekly." I said, "Well, I don't negotiate that. She does. Let me call her and call you back." He goes, "No. You go with what I'm telling you now, or I'm going to go with my next choice." I said, "Well, let me just call my agent and call you right back." And he goes, "No, that's it," and hung up on me, and I was fired.
Oh.
I was like, "Huh?" Like, what the fuck? And I called my agent. I said, "This just happened." And she goes, "Don't worry about it." I said, "Why?" And she says, "I have an agreement with the casting director. Don't worry about it." And sure enough, about 2 or 3 months later, I got paid for 2 weeks' work that I never did.
Oh, that's good at least.
Yeah. So I really would have liked to have worked on the film. It would have been fun.
Sure, yeah. I mean, man, that sucks when that happens sometimes. And then you did Pale Rider. Got any great Clint Eastwood stories?
Sure. You think I'm going to tell you? I can't tell you these. No, sure. Clint was great. That agent that was such a go-getter, Paula, she really upset casting people a lot because she was very aggressive. But she wanted her clients to work, and she didn't necessarily think that just breakdown services was giving her everything. So she would call around the studios, the casting department, say, what do you got casting that's not in breakdown? Maybe I have someone on my client list that would fit the role. And when she called Warner Brothers, they said, "Well, we have this one piece and this Clint Eastwood piece coming up that we're confident we'll cast it from our file." So what had happened was Chris Penn, Sean's little brother, who was very talented, had met Clint at a party and said, "I want to work with you." And Clint said, "Okay," and sent him the Pale Rider script, his Return to Westerns, which the writers told me they'd been trying for like 10 years to get Clint to do that Western. And Clint offered him the role of Eddie Conway, Spider's son. And Chris kind of threw it back and said, "I don't want to play a good guy, I want to play a bad guy." And Clint had, I guess, most of the roles already cast. So Clint said, "Well, how about LaHood's son, the one that the character that almost raped Sidney Penny's character, a little girl. And he says, great, I'll take that. So the actor Chuck LaFont, who had been cast as Teddy Conway, moved into Eddie. And so Teddy had become open, and they were pretty set to go shoot, in just a couple of weeks when my agent made this call. So she called me, said, I got you this audition, go in there and knock it out. And they sent me the sides for the scene where Eddie and Teddy are crying over Spider's dead body. And Fritz Manns put me on tape. I knew that I needed to cry on cue. Mm-hmm. So, and I'd studied a lot of different technique and didn't want to leave anything to chance. So I had a little bit of my subjective personalization where I had a lock of my grandmother's hair, who was really the only one in my family who said, darling, if you want to be an actor, you do it, buy yourself an ice cream. So I had a lock of her hair, who I really loved, in my pocket, and she had done a lot to me, and I had done my Meisner fantasy charging work where I imagined my own father's dead body, and, luckily, when the camera was rolling, I didn't need any of that crap. I just had the tears come with no problem, really. And Fritz sent it to Clint, and Clint hired me. I was on a plane, a couple days later, and going to Idaho where we shot. And I remember the first scene that I was to shoot, we blocked it, and Clint then went on to scout out the next shot, and while the crew dressed the set for my shot. And I followed Clint, because I hadn't really officially met him yet. So I followed Clint down the path, down the road, and when he turned back, he's in his duster and his hat, and he's very intimidating, and he turns to me and goes, yes? I go, Mr. Eastwood, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Jeffrey Weissman. We have to bet. He goes, I know who you are. Who do you think cast you?
That's a good way of doing his voice, by the way.
Yeah, I was like, of course. And, so things were really, it was quite an adventure on that set, to be on location for over 4 weeks with that amazing ensemble and some of them wild boys who were playing the bad guys. We got, just as soon as the bad deputies came in, we got snowed out by a blizzard. A few days previous, I remember I'd flown in my ex-wife to visit on set, and the day before she came in, Clint had fired the caterer. Oh. And the day she showed up, I brought her to set with me, and we were in the middle of a blizzard, and the new caterer was there on the top of this mountaintop where we're shooting, and they were serving steak and lobster in the middle of a blizzard. So it was Clint, my ex-wife, and I having steak and lobster in the middle of a blizzard. I was like, this is nice weather, eh? Clint, nice. And it was like, they expect it to be snowing in October. But I think Clint wanted to shoot up there near Ketchum, Sun Valley, because he had a home up there. I think he had like 9 homes at that time.
Yeah. And of course he had one in Carbell.
I kept Carrie Snodgrass from quitting that film.
Oh, you did?
Carrie and Clint and Michael Moriarty, they kept butting heads because she, very strong, wonderful actress, beautiful talent, God rest her. But she would get really upset because she saw her characters a certain way and they did not agree. And she wanted actions and activities for her to be more of a go-getter and independent woman who was raising this Indian child. And they just wouldn't let her and cut her off right and left, and she would blow her top. And I'd, because we had a mutual friend, I immediately made friends with her and would buy pictures of strawberry margarita and calm her down and, get her from actually quitting the film. Michael Moriarty actually walked off the film at one point.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me. I've heard he's pretty nuts.
Well, he was commissioned at the time, I believe, to write a symphony or something, and
really?
He wasn't shooting. He'd be back in his room composing on his piano. And during one of the early scenes where, actually the scene right after my character says, you go into town, ain't that kind of dumb? He goes to town and has the fight with the heavies in town. I think it was Marvin McIntyre and what's his face? Wonderful actor with the red hair. I'm going to blank. Not Holloway. from the TV show to, oh, well. Anyway, so I think the guys didn't pull their punches or slow it down during the fight choreography rehearsals. Mm-hmm. And Michael got hit and broke 3 fingers on his hand, and that pissed him off so much he walked off the set. You know, he quit. And it took Clint, I think, 3 days to get him back on set. Clint figured out a way to get Michael an instrument it's a keyboard that you can play with one hand while blowing. You know, you could anyway, whatever that instrument was, I figured it out to get Michael back to composing and get him back on set. But if you look at the film, when Paul Barrett, his character, is coming back on the buckboard from town, mm-hmm. his hand is in a cast, and he doesn't really hide it.
Oh. Yeah, I've seen
the editing on that film was really amazing, because like when we shot Spider's horrible death, it took us 3 days to get that shot, to shoot that scene. And the first day there was snow on the ground, but the sun was out, and we got, you know, the bad guys coming out and getting Doug McGrath and Spider to dance with their gunshots. And then the next day they had to start shooting him on the feet and up the legs and till the final shot between the eyes. And there were long days. He had to, you know, change wardrobe after each take, basically. And that second day, it was blizzarding. It was, you know, snowing hard. And so if you look when the shooting starts, Teddy and Eddie, we come out of the Mercantile, and we're in a blizzard. When it cuts back to Daddy, he's in sunshine. And then when he's finally dead and we make it over to his body, there was no snow at all, and it was sunshine again. So they brought out the oil-based fake snow. Mm-hmm. And so I slipped on it. When I got Daddy's body in the rehearsal, I slipped on it, almost kicked poor Doug in the head because Chuck hit my mark, and I then took Chuck's mark. And, you know, Clint learned from Don Siegel, who I think learned from John Ford, to shoot the rehearsals. Because mm-hmm. Often in the rehearsals, the actors aren't as tense or self-conscious. So it's a very smart move. And if you get in the rehearsal, you know, you can just move on. You don't need even to do a take. And when at the end of that shot, I heard Clint say, "All right, cut, let's move on." And I was like right in Clint's face. I said, Chuck didn't hit his mark. I had to take his mark. I slipped, almost kicked Doug in the head. And he goes, no, it looks fine. We'll just cut from your face.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not going to argue with that. I got a close-up.
I think that was supposed to be his last Western, too, until Unforgiven.
Yeah, which was brilliant. I sent him a Havana cigar. When I saw Unforgiven, I was like, this is fantastic. I sent a cigar to his production company. I hope he got it.
Mm-hmm. You did some episodes of Max Headroom. How was that?
Yeah, I don't know why IMDb has me in a second one. I just did the Rakers episode. For some reason, someone put me in the cast of another one. It was cool. It was nice to... that was the first time I worked with Jeffrey Tambor. I actually recommended Jeffrey for different roles that he got to directors who were looking for someone like that for roles that he was right for. Mm-hmm. And it was cool because, you know, meeting Matt, who already was legend from the UK version of Max Headroom, was very cool. He was a very nice guy. And it was a very cool set to work on. It was reminiscent at times for me of the set that Martin Brest, who, you know, eventually got fired and replaced by John Madden on War Games. They had that fantastic set for the you know, the control of NORAD or whatever it was. And the set there at Max Headroom was a very complex, you know, special effects set, and that was very cool to be a part of that. I didn't really have a lot to do on that set. It was more of just a support player, but it was cool to be on the set.
Yeah,
like I said, it was fun to meet Matt and hang out.
Yeah, it's amazing how that show just had an impact on pop culture in such a short amount of time. You know,
I think it was the effects. You know, the finally finding a way to get the. I don't think it was rotoscope, but whatever they did to make him glitch and be animated and yet human at the same time was very cool.
It was.
It's new technology, and one of the things I love is getting into the behind the camera action. I want to know what equipment they're using. Working on Twilight Zone, Garrett Brown was there with his Steadicam, running up and down the aisles to get the shots that, God rest him, just died last week. Alan Davio, our cinematographer, who was the main cinematographer on that episode of Twilight Zone. But Garrett Brown did all the heavy lifting on, running with that. The Steadicam back then, I think, was 65 pounds. And he was running up and down the aisles, getting all those incredible shots and fun. It was fascinating to learn, what the heck is this? And also, I remember George Miller being delighted that Alan Davio was able to get, for one of the first times, a tap on the lens so they could do video playback, so he could actually see what Alan was getting. So George was like, oh yes, I like that. He was able to direct even more the cinematographer's work.
Mm-hmm.
And Alan Davio was such a sweetheart. What a fantastic human being. He was like a little walking encyclopedia and a raconteur. Just a horrible loss. He just died from this virus.
Oh, that's terrible. Yeah. Now, I've heard different versions of why Crispin Glover didn't do Back to the Future 2 and 3, but what was it that you heard before you signed on?
Well, before I signed on, I didn't hear anything.
It was only later you found out.
Yeah, it was odd. When I got a call from an agent that had helped me get the Stan Laurel and Hardy gig up at Universal, who mainly handled lookalikes.
Mm-hmm.
He called up and said, do you know who Crispin Glover is? I was like, sure. I did a film with him at the AFI with Dan O'Hurley back in '83, a year before he even got cast in the first film. And so I thought he was a fascinating actor. Even got his number. And when Back to the Future came out, the first one in '85, I was like, God, Michael J. Fox and Chris Lloyd are fantastic. And then Crispin comes on and he knocks it out of the park. I was like, this is terrific, and I know that guy. And when this agent said, they're looking for a photo double for him, I said, well, Crispin's taller than me, probably heavier than me, and I don't look anything like him. I said, but what is it? Is this for the Back to the Future sequel? Because it was being rumored that it was in production. He said, I'm not allowed to say. I was like, oh, well, get me in there. So I went and met with the AD, and then they sent me to casting, and then they sent me to makeup, prosthetic fittings, and body cast fittings. And so in my mind, they needed George to be in multiple places at the same time. I'd heard from this agent who also supplied Kevin Holloway, who was Michael's photo double, that they were going to need Michael in several places at the same time. So I was like, oh, they need George in several places. So I was putting it together. Ken Chase, the wonderful award-winning makeup artist who designed the makeups on the first film and Wild Wild West, among many other projects, would tell me a few little tidbits about Crispin, how he flipped out during the first film when he had fallen asleep in his makeup chair and Ken trimmed his hair a little bit. And when Crispin found out, he blew his top because his powers in his hair, he believed, whatever. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I understand that. But anyway, I guess in the 11th hour, they must have, waited till all negotiations had failed. They came to me and said, you're going to play George. I was like, what? Because no one was really telling me anything except that Crispin wasn't available. I figured Crispin had, because of his success on River's Edge, and I think the Doors movie had come out not that long before, that he was on another project that he just couldn't get out of, that the schedules couldn't match up, and so that I was going to be taking over the role, which kind of freaked me out. I couldn't fathom how they were going to do it without him. Mm-hmm. But they put me in that young George makeup, age 17 for the 55 remake shots.
Yeah.
And spliced, a couple of close-ups of him with my work. I'm the one knocking Biff out and kissing Lorraine and on the dance floor and all that stuff. And And it was kind of creepy because, first of all, looking straight on, the makeup didn't really look like, kind of looked very strange. The profile, though, nailed Crispin's look, so they were obviously using his facial mold. And then also people were uncomfortable. I remember Michael saying, "Ooh, Crispin ain't gonna like this." And when Zemeckis would call action, he would refer to me as Crispin, and Leah would refer to me as Crispin. I was like, "This is creepy. It's weird." But I assumed, unfortunately, that they had his permission to use his facial likeness.
Yeah.
Little did I know. So, and also it was frustrating for me because coming into this beautiful ensemble cast as an outsider, at times I was not dealt with so warmly. So, by the end of the week, I was having a beer with Michael in his dressing room, and I'm being made up next to Tom and being made up next to Leah, and we're, in the chair for 4 hours a day just to apply another hour to take it off. So we got to know each other fairly well. Our makeup artists were fantastic. Everyone from Mike Mills and Marvin Westmore to Kenny Myers and Zoltan and his wife, and Nancy Bostad. Really, Sonny Berman, really great folk. So, to make a long story short, I felt a little shortchanged in that I was capable of honing a pretty good character, but I wasn't really included in the script reads or not much rehearsal on set. And I think because of them not knowing me so well, they didn't really give me all the bits and things that were possible for Old George in 2015. So I tried developing a few things that I had a special effect where Lorraine asks George to rotate his axis for pizza.
Yeah.
And I did a little golf swing and went, "Okay, 4." Doing the Glover signature guttural laugh. And I'm sure it looked really funny, but it didn't quite match, and I was in a body cast that bulked me out. I don't know if it looked right on screen, and she'd already put the plate on the floor. I don't know. It didn't quite match, and it also kept me out of the main focus of Michael playing the 3 roles at the table. And then there was, before that, Fruit Please. Lorraine asks Marlene to give her granddad a piece of fruit from the Fruit Please device in the ceiling. And she gives me a banana, which, trying to eat it upside down, the peel kept slapping me back in the face. And it was a funny little bit that Zemeckis did like, but it ultimately didn't stay in. I still do have a still of it, though.
Nice. Yeah, I remember being 7 years old watching part 2 for the first time, not knowing that it wasn't Crispin Glover, and I thought to myself, he was so great in the first one, why don't they give him more to do in this one?
Right. And then in part 3, he was to play Seamus.
Yeah.
The thing was that, after 3 came out, Crispin called me and told me what they had done and asked if I thought it was fair. And I said, "Oh, no, of course that doesn't sound fair. That they first of all used his face, and then for the reuse of those quick shots, they were going to pay him scale or something." And, it was all kind of very fishy. And Bob Gale had told me on set various stories about Crispin disappearing when they needed him to shoot on weekend dates and not telling them where he was and causing trouble bringing in a painting that he and Leah had made in a rehearsal to be put on the set, and Zemeckis was like, "No, I got an art director. I can't step on his toes. It's already been said." And Crispin flipping out over that, wanting that to be part of the McFly living room. So there were conflicts. It's really hard for me to take sides in this. I mean, I see Crispin's artistic integrity. He's an artist and wants to put his print on this, and his performance was really brilliant. And at the same time, it was unprofessional in many ways because he was breaking or pushing boundaries in a very strict atmosphere. And then at the same time, Crispin told me how Bob Gale made him cry in front of extras, and there's a lot of shitty things Crispin had to say about the whole thing. So I was literally caught between kind of warring factions. and it's still kind of continues. Crispin's still after Gail, Gail's still after Crispin, and I'm still in the middle of this, and I keep saying publicly, why can't you guys just shake hands and do something for the fans and Michael's charity? Come together. People would probably pay great money to see both Crispin and I and Bob Gale at the same event, actually getting along and letting it all go.
Yeah. I certainly think that should happen, I mean, you can't hold on to a grudge for too long,
Yeah, well, there was also, animosity. They did offer him, I think, $100,000 to come back and reprise the role, but he countered with $1 million. And I know this because while I was doing that body casting special effect, Spielberg actually came up to me and said, "So, Crispin, I see you got your $1 million after all." And I was like, "Huh?" I was, oh, God. And unfortunately, I told that story, and Crispin told his attorney, and that got into the Hollywood Reporter and the Variety, and people denied that it ever happened. I was like, of course it happened. I have no reason to lie. So it was not pretty. The fallout from that is I ended up getting blacklisted, and my whole world turned upside down. I
didn't even realize that. I didn't even realize you got blacklisted.
Yeah, it was not pretty. I had my boss at Universal, in fact, come to me and say, "What'd you do wrong on Murder, She Wrote?" And I was like, "Huh? Never worked on Murder, She Wrote." Well, the casting director just called and said that Angela Lansbury worked with Laurel Hardy in her youth, and once Laurel Hardy on the set, when her character's on this movie set, walking by her, and can you supply Laurel Hardy but not Jeffrey Weissman? And I was like, fuck, I've been blacklisted. And then other examples came about, and then, I asked pros in the industry, what can I do about this? And they said, just forget about it. Just let it go, blah, blah, move on. But unfortunately, my hypersensitivity got the best of me, and avoidance behavior kicked in. I ended up, my life turned upside down. My family kind of split apart. It was pretty shitty. So I kind of gave up on Hollywood and moved. And, it was good, too, because the traffic was making me into a monster.
Oh, my God.
So out of Hollywood, I've been kind of a bigger fish in the ponds that I've been swimming in. And I get some nice roles from time to time in features and some television and on stage. So I continue working.
My God. How long ago was it that you realized that you had a cult following, though, from the Back to the Future movies?
Well, shortly after Part 3 came out, I had a guy show up to interview me. He found me on the tour in 92 or so. And I thought that was kind of cool. He's been broadcasting that interview from, maybe it was 93. I'm going to have to get back to you with his real name because he has his talk show that he has. His character has got this late night talk show host that wears a black wig and dark glasses, and it throws me because JD, but I'm going to blank on his character name as well. Let me look it up after our interview, and I'll get it back to you if I can. Mm-hmm. Anyway, he kind of discovered me and gave me a nice interview, and then a few years later, I got contacted by a guy who was an inventor, who is apparently Tom Wilson, to appear with his product at a car show in Vegas. And Tom backed out at the last minute when he found out a DeLorean time machine was going to be there. And he asked if I would take his place, Tom's place, and I said, sure. And this guy, Daniel, ended up getting me invited to the DeLorean owners' shows. And so the DeLorean owners kind of adopted me. I did probably 5 or 6 of their shows as a guest. Sometimes I'd entertain as Charlie Chaplin, and sometimes I'd MC their awards ceremonies, and I'd learn a lot about DeLorean and got to be friends with a lot of the original workers from Ireland and on that car. And then slowly but surely they started adding Claudia Wells and even Bob Gale, and kind of, leaving the opportunity for Bob to open up and kind of apologize to me or kind of do some kind of healing. I always hoped for, but it never really came. And I think it sort of became Bob's territory now, and I wasn't going to be included in that. It was like, oh shit, it's starting up again. But I'm very, very good friends with many, many DeLorean owners around the world, which is very cool. Here on my little farm, a couple of years ago, I had 5 DeLoreans show up that were on a world tour from Germany.
Mm-hmm.
It was so cool. And I have many dear friends who have made their own DeLorean time machines that I'll sometimes play Doc Brown with and do photo ops. It's real fun. And then about 2008, the Hollywood show did the first, as far as I know, Back to the Future cast reunion.
Yeah.
And I think there were over 20 cast and crew members at that show. And then Michael showed up on Sunday unannounced because he was on a book tour, happened to be going through L.A., and he got mobbed. But it was really great to see Michael again. It was wonderful to finally meet Chris Lloyd. I actually met Chris Lloyd while we were shooting, even though we didn't have any scenes together. I was such a huge fan, I got Mike Mills, my makeup artist, to introduce us at 3 in the morning during one of the Hill Valley 2015 exterior shots. And Chris is very, if he doesn't know you, he's very quiet and reserved, and that's what that meeting was like. It was like, nice to meet you.
Yeah.
I love your work. Yo, thanks.
Yeah.
And, okay, I got to go now. But slowly but surely start doing events with Chris. I remember the New Beverly doing a trilogy screening, and Claudia, Chris, and I were the guests for it. And Chris and I spent about 40 minutes before the showing with our Q&A in the projectionist booth, and we really started chatting and getting to know each other. We've had some nice chats and visits and meals at like London Film and Comic Con and various other places that we've seen each other, fundraisers for Make-A-Wish Foundation at the Exotic Car Show in Celebration, Florida, and other cast members. I've put a band together made up of cast members for fundraisers. I call the band Mr. Fusion, and I got Harry Waters Jr., who played Marvin Berry as the lead singer, and Don Fololove, who played Mary Goldie Wilson on bass, and Mark McClure, who played Dave McFly on drums, and I play guitar. And we play the songs from the movies.
Huh.
At your very own Enchantment Under the Sea dance, if you want to do one for your next fundraiser.
Oh, that's cool. Wow. I'd like to have a birthday party like that. That'd be cool.
Yeah, get a DeLorean time machine there. Be the hit with all your friends. And who knows what we're going to be able to do after this pandemic.
Yeah. Which brings me to ask, I know that you've been teaching acting up in San Francisco for a while now. So are you doing like online classes during the quarantine?
Yes. In fact, last night was the last of a 6-week Pay What You Can class that I've been Zooming.
Mm-hmm.
That's been very rewarding because I get students from all over. I had a nice breakthrough with one student from Florida last night. She just finally stopped, sort of performing and broke the mold and started really connecting to her gut and her emotions and making it real. So it's really lovely to even be able to get students to make breakthroughs virtually instead of having to be there right with them. And having about, over a dozen other students witness a student making the breakthrough. It's just like being in class, but not, but is. Yeah. And so I am doing what I can. I'm doing a lot of table reads, which is really fun for TV pilots and feature films, and even just an actors group. After this conversation, I'm going with a group of actors on the East Coast to Zoom a play. I'm working with some of the founders of the Actors Gang. You may know Lee Ehrenberg from the Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
Yeah.
The great Ron Campbell. A great group of guys. We're going to be doing an updated pandemic version of Waiting for Godot.
Huh.
And
that's interesting.
And then this coming weekend, I'm doing, knock on wood, Quarantined Con. So if you go to quarantinecon.com, you can see Larry Cedar who played the Gremlin on the wing of the airplane in Twilight Zone movie.
Yes. And
was in Deadwood, among other, very fine actor. He's part of this, and a lot of really great talent, artists and actors are doing Quarantined Con. So quarantinecon.com, May 2nd and 3rd.
Nice. Yeah, I've seen everybody do these quarantine conventions for the last few weeks and stuff. I hope it's not permanent. I mean, definitely there's going to be safety hazards and precautions going on in future conventions, but I hope that they're not all going to be online.
Absolutely. I'm a very social. I'm a very people-oriented person. When I see a kid at a Comic-Con that's really not sure what it's all about, I whip out a balloon and make them a balloon animal. Or, I really love people. And, when I worked at Universal, because Laurel and Hardy and Charlie Chaplin, these characters were known, at least in the United Kingdom, around the world, in their territories, because they were British originally. Mm-hmm. People from India or China, basically around the world, would always come up to have a photo with us. And so I learned to greet in about 15 different languages. So if I'm doing a con, say in Europe, and I have French or Belgian, I can speak, at least greet in Flemish and French and German and Dutch and all the Mid-Eastern and Eastern European languages as best I can. And it really helps break the ice. They actually feel like you care a little bit, which I do. I really love people and love being alive. So it's a way of celebrating.
Yeah.
So losing that is extremely painful.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine. Yeah, hopefully everything will turn around real soon. I'm keeping...
Your lips.
Yeah, I'm keeping, optimism open and all that stuff. But
what do you do, Tommy? You've never really talked about yourself. It's all been about everyone else in your 800 broadcasts. What do you do?
Oh, I've talked about myself in various episodes. So I've been recovering from a car accident for the last 5 years. I had spent years working in retail and security while doing stand-up comedy and acting as a hobby. And since my accident, I've been pursuing everything professionally. And it's been a slow process, but I'm going to keep going,
And you're giving a great gift. I was not aware of your show before, and to see the amount, is it really 800?
It's going to be 800 by the end of the week, probably.
Amazing. So over 800 shows with so many different wonderful people from the entertainment world. It's quite an achievement.
It has just been phenomenal, I never thought that I would, have conversations with these people. But, I just said one day I'm going to do it, and I did. And I didn't think I was going to do it after 10 episodes, but then I just kept going. And living up here in the countryside in Reading, it can get really boring up here, and there's nothing to do. So I've been able to do all of that, And
I'm glad you're staying occupied, keeping busy. And I know exactly the condition all too well of trying to get your life back. My wife currently had central nervous system blood lymphoma, mm-hmm. and it caused 5 brain tumors. And even though she's been cancer-free for 9 years or more, it's still the side effects of the neuropathy and the necrosis is just horrible. And also on top of it, the ageism that she faces. So it's all too well the struggle. So God give you strength, and thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, thank you so much, sir. Yes, and hopefully you'll get back in the classroom after all of this is all said and done.
Yeah, and it's hard. Just with example, in 2 weeks in May, I was to premiere my solo show that I wrote, me playing Mark Twain. Mm-hmm. I played Twain in a PBS docudrama called Mark Twain, Dreamland, Mark Twain in Jerusalem, based on his trip in 1867 to the Holy Land. And then I've written a solo show, actually 2 different solo shows as Twain, and I was going to have my big premiere up at the Calaveras Jumping Frog Jubilee, which just got canceled. And then right after that, I was going to North Italy for the StarCon to appear with Peter Weller. And, of course, that got canceled, Italy being one of the hot spots for the pandemic. So it's rough, losing all this money and all these opportunities. But, yeah, pray that everything gets back on track.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have yourself a great day, Jeffrey, and God bless you.
And you too, and tell your fans to come visit my website. If they want an autographed picture, they're available through jeffreyweissman.com.
Oh, I'm definitely going to check that out. Okay.
And yeah, check out the slideshow. I sent you the video YouTube link.
Yeah, I got a friend who he hasn't been answering his phone. He's been going through an awful lot. He's a computer wizard, so I'm going to get the whole slideshow thing done, this year. So
great. Well, enjoy the one I sent you. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
You will, Tommy.
Okay. Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. Jeffrey Weissman. Ain't he a cool dude? Oh, man. When I hear a story like being blacklisted, I mean, that is just fucking terrible, and people don't realize blacklist isn't just existing in the McCarthy era. It's happening all the time, and wow, he has persevered. Man, I love hearing those stories. They're sad, but I love hearing them because then, he comes back and you can't touch him. That is great. If you like this video, everyone, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, add me as a friend on Facebook, join my Tommy Kovac comedian page on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and all that fun stuff. Well, that's all time we have this week on Splat from the Past. Until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying there's no shame in living in the past because the present sucks. Later, dudes.